Dad died 8 months ago. Heart attack, sudden, devastating. He was only 62. One day he was here, planning his retirement, talking about finally taking that trip to Ireland he'd always dreamed about. The next day, he was gone. Mom was shattered. My sister Claire and I were shattered. We all were. The funeral was huge. Dad had been a high school English teacher for 30 years, and it seemed like half the town showed up. Former students, colleagues, neighbors, friends. Everyone had a story about how Dad had helped them, inspired them, changed their lives. He was that kind of person. The kind who made everyone feel seen and valued, or at least that's what I thought. After the funeral, after the initial tsunami of grief had subsided into a constant, manageable ache, we had to deal with Dad's stuff. His clothes, his books, his papers. Mom couldn't face it, so Claire and I volunteered. We'd do it together, we decided. Make a weekend of it. Sort through everything, keep what mattered, donate the rest. That was 3 weeks ago. We started with the easy stuff. Clothes went to Goodwill, except for a few sweaters and his favorite jacket that still smelled like him. Books we divided up. I took his collection of poetry. Claire took his novels. We found his old record player and his vinyl collection carefully preserved. We laughed and cried going through photos from our childhood, from his and Mom's early years together. Then we got to his office. Dad's office was his sanctuary. A small room at the back of the house, lined with bookshelves, dominated by an old oak desk he'd inherited from his own father. This was where he graded papers, where he wrote, where he retreated when he needed quiet. Growing up, we knew not to disturb Dad when he was in his office. It was sacred space. Claire and I stood in the doorway for a long moment before going in. It felt like trespassing somehow, even though Dad was gone and we had every right to be there. The desk was neat, organized. Dad had always been meticulous. Bills filed in one drawer, school papers in another, personal correspondence in a third. We started going through systematically, deciding what needed to be kept for estate purposes and what could be discarded. That's when I found the box. It was at the back of the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of old tax returns. A shoebox, old and worn, tied shut with string. There was no label, nothing to indicate what was inside. But something about it felt deliberate, like it had been hidden on purpose. I pulled it out and showed it to Claire. She shrugged, said we might as well see what was in it. I untied the string and lifted the lid. Letters, dozens of them, maybe 100. All in envelopes, most of them opened, arranged chronologically based on the postmarks. The earliest ones were from 1987. The most recent was from 6 months before Dad died. I pulled out the first letter, dated March 1987. It was addressed to Dad at a P.O. box I'd never heard of. The return address was in a town about 2 hours away. The name on the return address was Linda Morrison. I didn't recognize the name. I pulled the letter out of the envelope. It was handwritten, neat cursive on lined paper. It started with "My dearest James," which was weird because nobody called Dad James. He'd always gone by Jim. Only official documents used his full name. I started reading. By the second paragraph, my hands were shaking. By the end of the letter, I couldn't breathe. Claire asked what was wrong. I couldn't answer. Just handed her the letter. I watched her face as she read it. Watched confusion turn to shock, turn to horror. She looked up at me, her face white. She asked if this was what she thought it was. I told her I didn't know. But we needed to read the rest. We sat on the floor of Dad's office and went through every single letter in that box. It took hours. We didn't speak except to occasionally read a passage aloud, to confirm we were both seeing the same thing, that we weren't going crazy. The letters told a story I never knew, a story that changed everything. In 1986, Dad had started teaching summer courses at a community college 2 towns over. Extra money for the family, he'd said. He'd drive over 3 days a week, teach evening classes, come home late. Except he wasn't just teaching. Linda Morrison was a student in one of his classes, 23 years old, working full-time and taking night classes to finish her degree. The early letters were professional, discussing her coursework, her progress, but they got progressively more personal, more intimate. By fall of 1986, they were having an affair. I know this because Dad kept her letters, every single one. Letters where she told him she loved him. Letters where she talked about their future together. Letters where she said she knew it was complicated, knew he had a wife and kids, but she couldn't help how she felt. Letters where she told him she was pregnant. I remember that time. Late 1986, early 1987, I was 6 years old. Claire was 4. I remember Dad being stressed, remember whispered conversations between him and Mom that would stop when Claire and I entered the room. I remember Dad taking more of those evening teaching gigs, being gone more often. Now I know why. Linda had the baby in July 1987, a boy. She named him James, after Dad. The letters from after the birth were heartbreaking. Linda writing about how hard it was, raising a baby alone, how she understood Dad couldn't leave his family, but couldn't he help more? Couldn't he be there more? Their son needed his father. And Dad responded. We found copies of his letters too, tucked in with hers. Carbon copies made on thin paper, carefully preserved. He told Linda he loved her, told her he loved their son, but he couldn't leave his family. He had responsibilities. He had 2 other children who needed him, but he'd support them financially. He'd visit when he could. He'd be there for them as much as possible. And apparently, he was. For the next 35 years, Dad maintained 2 families, 2 separate lives, running in parallel. He'd tell Mom he was going to conferences, educational workshops, visiting friends, and he'd go to them. To Linda and James, the letters tracked it all. James's first birthday, first day of school, Little League games, high school graduation, college. Linda writing about how proud she was, how much James looked like his father, how James had Dad's love of literature, his way with words. There were photos too, tucked into some of the envelopes. A little boy with dark curly hair and Dad's smile, a teenager in a baseball uniform, a young man in a cap and gown, my brother, my half-brother, who I never knew existed. Claire and I just sat there surrounded by these letters, these photos, this evidence of an entire secret life our father had led, this other family he'd had, these other people he'd loved, this other son he'd raised. And we'd never known, never suspected, not once in 35 years. I thought about all the times Dad had been gone, all the conferences and workshops and weekend trips, all the times he'd said he had to work late, had to meet with a colleague, had to attend some educational event. How much of it was real? How much was cover for his other life? I thought about Mom. Did she know? Had she known all along and just never said anything? Or was she in the dark too, trusting her husband when he said he had to be away, believing in the marriage they'd built? I thought about my childhood, All those memories of Dad being there for me and Claire, teaching me to ride a bike, helping with homework, attending my school plays and Claire's dance recitals. Had he been doing the same things with James? Had he been teaching another little boy to ride a bike? Attending another kid's school events? Had we been sharing him all along without knowing it? The most recent letter was dated 6 months before Dad died. Linda writing about James's engagement. How happy he was. How he'd asked his father to be his best man at the wedding. How James understood why Dad might not be able to do that, given the circumstances, but he wanted to ask anyway. Dad's response was in there too. Apologizing, saying he couldn't be the best man, couldn't stand up at the wedding officially. But he'd be there. He'd find a way to be there. He'd never missed the important moments in James's life, and he wouldn't start now. I realized with a sick feeling that Dad had died before that wedding could happen. James had lost his father right before getting married, just like I'd lost mine. Except I'd gotten to grieve publicly. I'd gotten to stand at the funeral and receive condolences and share memories. What had James gotten? Had he even been able to come to the funeral? Had he been there, standing in the crowd, unable to identify himself as Dad's son? Claire finally spoke. She asked what we were going to do. I didn't have an answer. What do you do when you discover something like this? When you find out your father wasn't who you thought he was? When you discover you have a brother you never knew about? Do we tell Mom? Do we try to find Linda and James? Do we pretend we never found these letters and just bury them again? Claire said we should tell Mom. She deserved to know. She'd been married to Dad for 40 years. If she didn't know about this, she had a right to find out. And if she did know? Claire asked. What then? I told her I honestly didn't know which would be worse. Finding out Mom had been betrayed and lied to for decades, or finding out she'd known all along and helped maintain the deception. We sat there for hours, going through the letters again and again, trying to make sense of it, trying to reconcile the father we knew, the good man, the devoted teacher, the loving dad, with this other man, the man who'd had an affair with his student, the man who'd maintained a secret second family for 35 years, the man who'd lied to everyone constantly for decades. Eventually, Claire said we couldn't make this decision alone. We needed to talk to Mom. I dreaded that conversation more than anything I'd ever done in my life. We waited until the next day. Let ourselves process a little. Get a bit of sleep, though I barely managed any. In the morning, we drove to Mom's house. She was in the garden tending to her roses. She smiled when she saw us. That sad smile she'd had since Dad died. Asked if we wanted coffee. We went inside, sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd had family dinners growing up, where Dad used to help me with my math homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesday nights. Claire asked Mom if she was sitting down. Mom got worried, asked what was wrong. I pulled out the box, told her we'd found it in Dad's office, told her she needed to read what was inside. Mom's face changed as soon as she saw the box. Something in her expression shifted. Closed off? She asked where we'd found it. I told her it was in the back of the bottom drawer, under old tax returns. Mom was quiet for a long moment. Then she said she knew about the box, had known about it for years. My stomach dropped. Claire made a sound like she'd been punched. Mom said she'd found the letters 15 years ago. She'd been looking for an old tax return and stumbled across the box. Read everything in it. confronted Dad. He'd admitted everything. The affair, Linda, James, all of it. Told Mom he was sorry, that it had been a mistake that spiraled out of control, that he'd never meant to hurt anyone. But by the time he realized how complicated it had gotten, James was 10 years old, and Dad couldn't just abandon him. That would hurt an innocent child. Mom said she'd almost left him, came very close, packed bags, talked to a lawyer, but in the end, she'd decided to stay. For us, she said. Claire and I were teenagers then. She didn't want to tear the family apart during such a crucial time in our lives. And honestly, she said she still loved him, despite everything. Despite the betrayal and the lies, she still loved the man she'd married, still believed in the good parts of him. So they'd made an agreement. Dad would continue supporting Linda and James. Mom said it wouldn't be fair to abandon them completely, to punish a child for his father's mistakes. But he'd be more present at home, more involved with our family, and he'd be honest with Mom about when he was going to see them. It wasn't perfect, Mom said. It was painful and complicated, and there were times she regretted not leaving. But it was what she chose, her decision. And Dad had kept his end of the bargain. He was more present, more attentive. Their marriage wasn't what it had been before she found out, but it was something, and she'd made peace with it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Couldn't believe Mom had known for 15 years and never said anything. Had let Claire and me continue believing in this perfect image of Dad and our family. I asked her why. Why didn't she tell us? Mom said it wasn't our burden to carry. It was between her and Dad. We deserved to have a relationship with our father that wasn't tainted by his mistakes. We deserved to remember him as the good dad he was to us, not as the man who'd betrayed his family. Claire asked if she'd ever met them, Linda and James. Mom said no. That was part of the agreement. Dad's two families would remain separate. She didn't want to know them, didn't want to see the physical evidence of Dad's betrayal, but she knew about them. Dad would tell her when he was going to visit them, when there were important events. She knew when James graduated high school, knew when he got accepted to college, knew about his engagement. It was surreal hearing Mom talk about this other family so matter-of-factly, like they were distant relatives we occasionally heard about, not a secret second family that Dad had maintained for decades. I asked if anyone else knew, if any of Dad's friends or family had known. Mom said she didn't think so. Dad had been very careful, very compartmentalized. That was one of the things that hurt the most, she said. How good he was at the deception. How easily he could switch between his two lives. Claire asked the question I was afraid to ask. Had Dad loved Linda? Was it just about supporting his son, or did he actually have feelings for her? Mom was quiet for a long time. Then she said honestly, she thought he did. Not the same way he loved her, maybe. But there was something there. You don't maintain a relationship with someone for 35 years out of pure obligation. That hurt more than anything. Not just that Dad had had a physical affair, but that he'd loved someone else. For decades. While married to Mom. While raising me and Claire. I asked Mom if she was okay. If she'd been okay all these years carrying this secret. She said some days were better than others. Some days she could almost forget. Other days, especially in the last few years, it had eaten at her. She'd considered telling us several times, especially after we were adults, but by then, so much time had passed. How do you suddenly drop that kind of bomb after years of silence? and then Dad died. And Mom thought maybe the secret could die with him. Maybe she'd never have to tell us. Maybe we could all just keep the memory of him intact, untarnished. But here we were. Claire asked the question we'd both been thinking. What do we do now? Do we try to find Linda and James? Mom looked scared at that. Said it was our decision to make. We were adults, but she asked us to think carefully about whether we really wanted to open that door, whether we were prepared for what might come from it. Because Linda and James had their own grief, their own version of Dad to remember. And maybe, like us, they deserved to keep that uncomplicated. But I couldn't let it go. I had a brother out there, a half-brother who just lost his father, who was supposed to get married soon, who'd grown up in the shadow of Dad's other family, just like I'd grown up unaware of his existence. Didn't he deserve to know he had siblings? Didn't we deserve to know each other? I told Mom I wanted to find them, wanted to reach out. Claire agreed. Mom said okay, but she wouldn't be part of it. She'd made her peace with the situation as it was. She didn't need to revisit it, didn't need to meet them or integrate these two parts of Dad's life. That was for us to do if we chose. She did give us one thing, though. Linda's current address. Dad had updated it in his address book over the years. Mom had seen it. That was 2 weeks ago. I've been sitting with Linda's address for 2 weeks, trying to figure out what to do, what to say. How do you reach out to your dead father's secret family? How do you introduce yourself to a brother you never knew existed? Hey, I'm David. I'm your half-brother. Our dad had a secret life. Want to get coffee? It sounds insane even thinking about it. But I can't stop thinking about James, about what he must be going through. Did he get to mourn Dad properly? Did he have people around him who knew about the loss? Or is he grieving in secret, unable to fully express his pain because most people didn't even know Dad was his father? Claire and I have talked about it every day. She's scared, worried about what might happen if we reach out. What if Linda and James resent us? What if they blame us for Dad not being able to be fully present in their lives? What if meeting them makes everything worse? But what if it makes things better? What if James needs to know he's not alone? What if there's a chance for us to be family, even if it's complicated and messy? I've written and deleted a dozen emails to Linda, started and abandoned countless letters, picked up the phone to call more times than I can count. Today, I finally did it. I sent an email. It was simple, direct. I introduced myself as James Harper's son, said I'd recently found some letters and learned about Linda and James, said I understood this was probably shocking and I was sorry to reach out of the blue. But I wanted James to know that he has siblings who would like to meet him if he's open to it. No pressure, no expectations, just an offer. I included my phone number and email, told Linda to take whatever time she needed, to discuss it with James, to decide what felt right for them. Then I hit send before I could second-guess myself again. That was 6 hours ago. I've checked my email approximately every 3 minutes since then. Haven't gotten a response yet. Maybe I never will. Maybe Linda will delete the email. Maybe she'll decide it's better to keep Dad's two families separate, even in death. Maybe James doesn't want to know us, and maybe that's okay. Maybe some secrets are meant to stay buried. But I had to try, had to reach out, because somewhere out there is a 35-year-old man who grew up knowing his father had another family, but never got to meet them, who lost his dad right before his wedding, who's been carrying his own complicated grief and secrets, and he's my brother. I don't know what happens next. Don't know if Linda will respond. Don't know if James will want to meet us. Don't know how Claire and Mom and I will handle it if he does. But I know I can't unknow what I know now. Can't go back to the simple version of my family history. Can't pretend Dad was just the good, uncomplicated man I thought he was. He was more complex than that. More flawed. More human. He was a man who made a terrible mistake in his 20s and then spent the next 35 years trying to make the best of an impossible situation. He hurt people. He lied to people he loved. But he also tried, in his own flawed way, to be there for everyone. To not abandon anyone. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Don't know if his attempts to take care of two families excuses the betrayal of the first one. Don't know if being a good father to James justifies lying to me and Claire and Mom. Maybe there are no easy answers. Maybe people are just messy and complicated, and we do the best we can with the choices we make, even when those choices hurt people we love. All I know is that my father had two sons, and one of them is out there grieving alone, not knowing he has a brother and sister who would like to know him. So I reached out, and now I wait. My phone just buzzed. It's an email from Linda. I'm staring at it, too scared to open it. This could change everything, or nothing. This could be the start of something, or the definitive end. Claire is sitting next to me. She knows I got the email. She's holding my hand, waiting for me to be ready. I don't know if I'm ready, but I guess ready or not, this is happening. I'm opening the email. It's short. Just a few lines. Linda says she's shocked to hear from me, but not surprised. She says James has wanted to reach out to us for years, but didn't think it was his place. She says Dad talked about me and Claire often. Said he was proud of us. Said he wished things could have been different. She says James would like to meet us, if we're serious about this, if we're prepared for how complicated it might be. She's included James's email address and phone number. Said he's asked her to tell us that he doesn't blame us for anything. He knows we didn't know. He says he'd like a chance to know his siblings, even though it's all so strange and sad. The wedding is in 6 weeks. Linda says if we want to come, we'd be welcome. It would have meant the world to Dad. It would mean the world to James. I look at Claire. She's crying. So am I. I don't know what the next chapter of this story looks like. Don't know how we integrate James into our lives, or how he integrates us into his. Don't know how we navigate being siblings when we missed 35 years of each other's lives. But we're going to try. Because family is complicated. Family is messy. Family is people doing their best in impossible situations and sometimes failing spectacularly. But family is also showing up. It's reaching out when things are hard. It's choosing connection over comfort. Dad kept us separate because he thought it was protecting us, because he thought keeping his two families apart would hurt less. But maybe he was wrong. Maybe we're stronger together than apart. Maybe knowing the whole truth, even when it's painful, is better than living with a beautiful lie. I'm going to call James tomorrow. I'm terrified, but I'm also hopeful. Because somewhere out there is a brother I never knew I had. And maybe, despite everything, despite all the lies and secrets and complications, we can be family. The kind of family that's honest about the hard stuff. The kind that exists because we choose it, not just because we share DNA. Dad's gone. We can't ask him why he did what he did. Can't get his side of the story. Can't tell him how much his secrets hurt. but we're still here. Me, Claire, Mom, Linda, James. We're all still here, trying to make sense of what he left behind. And maybe that's something. Maybe that's enough.